Welcome to Basics of Hunting, where we cut through the BS of modern, gimmicky hunting tactics and get back to the tried and true basics that help us be successful in the woods.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. Today, we are all back together. It's been a while.
I like how you say all of us, like it's a big group of us. It's me and Jake, and we're back together.
Most of the time, yeah. But I don't know. We've been pretty busy, and I know this isn't a big long form. We're doing the basics of hunting today. So short, simple, sweet, to the point. But today we are talking about the rut. Christian, out of all the days to hunt, is now your favorite, or are you more of that early season before things get hectic?
I'm not a rut bow hunter. Never claimed to be. I really do enjoy the increased activity during the rut, but as a bow hunter, it usually just ends up me looking at some big ones running away through my binos. I never really had maybe the best pieces of property to hunt during the rut, or just places that I can get them stopped. So as a bow hunter, no. If I had a rifle in my hand, I'd be over the moon. But no, I'm an early season guy.
Rifle season's coming up here in Oklahoma. It's like, I don't know, a couple weeks away. So, but I guess to jump right into it, we're going to start with the basics. And what is the rut? So, Christian, if you were to, just give a brief little cutting out all the BS summary of the rut, how would you put it into your words?
I would imagine as a grown man, a time where you had to abstain from getting some or having sex for an entire year. And there was a select few ladies that came into the time, and what's funny is does I think it's completely against their will, so it's kind of a weird thing to get all together, but it's just a breeding period, and it's very very short and sweet comparative to, like, as humans we can breed all year. Deer breed, I don't know how long a doe goes in estrus, but it's just I'd say about a month of the heat of the activity during that November time period where we're at. That could be different across the country. I know in Mexico and stuff, it's like they're waiting till like January for their rut. Not in New Mexico, their mule deer rut's like in January, which is kind of odd, but just a condensed breeding period that leads to a lot of daytime activity, especially bucks chasing does.
Right, and kind of like you touched on a second ago, like the quote-unquote rut can be happening in different parts of the country at different times of the year. So like here in Oklahoma, It's usually, pre-rut, late October, and, and then you get in that rut activity probably the second to third week of November, and then it kind of peters off the closer you get to December, usually, right? And then then if you go to like somewhere in Florida, kind of like you said, January, February rut type activity. But, there might be some people that are just getting into hunting and they're like, okay, the rut, I've heard that term before, but I've heard some people say, maybe the pre-rut, or, the rut's in full blown, or maybe it's, post rut. Can you kind of explain, the differences between the three?
Yeah. Pre-rut is just, I think it's like you have this hike coming out of the velvet, when bucks have low testosterone growing their antlers all summer, which leads up to this fever pitch. Is like a hiking of testosterone. And the pre-rut is just kind of like that. I think of the pre-rut as like that time where you're in the locker room before a football game and you're kind of just like pacing back and forth. You're like, come on. You're like, I'm ready. And that's kind of what the pre-rut is. It's these bucks like marching around just this eagerness to find the first hot doe. And that usually lasts, in my mind, like anywhere from like 7 to 10 days. And weather pattern is probably going to affect a lot of the movement that you see during the pre-rut, which I feel like more and more we don't have much of a pre-rut with the hot weather that we've been experiencing.
It's kind of seeming like that, ain't it?
It just seems like we go from an early season pattern to the rut. It's like a light switch, and it didn't used to be that way when we got more cold weather, but then we obviously go into the rut, which is the peak of that breeding activity and chasing, and really a rifle hunter or a bow hunter that's got a good spot's dream. And then that post-rut period, you see them going back to that bed-to-food pattern, that the rut takes a toll on a buck. I know bucks can lose double-digit percentages of their body weight during the rut activity, so they get heavy back on the food after that. And it's a fun time. I enjoy hunting them in all those seasons, but the rut, especially people targeting an individual buck, a lot of people hate the rut if they're, but for the folks like you who grew up hunting a property that's a travel corridor between two pieces of big bedding, right? It's your best opportunity to see a buck all year that you have never laid eyes on or don't even know exists. You got a lot of experience with that.
Well, that's the fun of it, right? Or some of the fun. I mean, it kind of sucks during the October lull, as some people call it, because there's not a lot of activity. It's usually hot, a lot of nocturnal movement. But now it's kind of that ramp up, and kind of like you said, if you have a target buck, this is like a nightmare for you. But if you're somewhere that's like, hey, I'm just hoping for a unicorn to stroll through, this is your time. This is the best time to be out in the woods by far. And especially if you can kind of match that with a cold front, you're going to be in for hopefully a very good surprise. But kind of going back to your what's it called, an analogy of, football players in a locker room getting ready for the game.
Yep.
Kind of trying to transition that into signs of the rut. So, how if you're, let's say a mature buck or maybe a senior in high school, and you've been through the ringer a couple times with football games, getting ready and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Who are usually the most like hype in that locker room at first? Like, it's usually the freshmen, right? The freshmen are doing crazy stuff. Yeah, like making sure their makeup's on good. Their eye paint, and they're just being kind of dumb, and they're acting more hype than the more mature senior class people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the same way it is in the deer woods. And usually the first signs you get are, those young bucks trying to chase around and move around those does. And, so you'll be seeing, maybe a 1 or 2 year old kind of starting to grunt up a little bit, maybe trying to push around a doe. And that doe's like, no, not you, pipsqueak. So it's kind of like that transition where it's like, okay, you'll probably see that first. And then you might see a little bit of sign being made, if you're walking around in the woods. And then sooner or later, it's like the mature bucks are like, all right, I'll get up now and start chasing.
Well, those Forkies and Spikes and just, let's just call it 2.5 and below age classes. It seems like they're the people that have been seeing like a 90 mile an hour fastball, and then somebody throws a 70 mile an hour changeup, and they like swing before it gets 8 foot to the plate from the plate. They're just like, they're just eager. They don't know what's happening, so they're like, I see a doe, I kind of feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so they're pushing them around. I feel like often even before the does are in estrus. But yeah, it's definitely like it used to be, at least used to see it like this steady ramp up, right? It's like, oh, I see Forkies chasing, I see little bucks chasing. It's like it's coming. But I still think even on November 9th when we're recording this, we're not in it yet. We're not in the heat of it.
I don't know. I had probably not the heat of it, but there's definitely signs. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
winter
but
coming,
which we'll talk about our previous, hunting early November.
Well, let me ask you this: so when you start getting into this, let's just say November 10s, so 10th, 11th, 12th, all the way up to the 20th,
right?
Is this something that you're going to start? You're obviously going to start seeing more increased buck activity. Is this something you're going to like disregard all the scrubs and scrapes? There is some rape going on. Don't get me wrong.
Oh my God,
the scrapes and rubs, or in getting in corridors for rutting activity, or like when do you give up, fresh sign for just good travel corridors?
I mean, I think you can do both, right? Like, I think you can see where the fresh sign has been made and probably expect that if it's in a good travel corridor, like that's just a no brainer. Like, would you rather hunt a good travel corridor with no sign or a travel corridor with sign? And it's like, I'm probably going to pick the one with sign. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, which I guess could lead into, like more signs that the rut is taking place, because we talked about it last couple weeks, when we were talking about the pre-rut and back in October, how, we walked through the woods, probably put miles on the boost, just trying to find some sign or bump deer or something. And that sign wasn't really abundant where we hunt, kind of in the classified as the big woods is what we call it. Right. So now it's like, it might just be because the foliage is kind of dying, the leaves are dropping, the grass is kind of getting dormant, that those signs are presenting themselves a little bit, easier to see. And so maybe that has something to do with it. But from the last time we went in October to, we just got back from our vacation this week, I seen a heck of a lot more sign.
Oh man. Me too. There was one spot where I walked in, and in mid-October, a single rub, I was like, it's the only rub I've seen though. So I'm getting really excited. And then I walked in, about a week ago, first day of November, and I counted 6 rubs that I'd never seen before on the way in. It was like I was walking past all of them to get to my stand location. And that sign was getting laid down a lot more. Now, we had some weird weather patterns and some rain and some heat waves. So like, I feel like it suppressed a lot of that activity, but the sign was getting laid down in the last 2 weeks. And it was exciting.
When you talk about, maybe possibly hunting over sign, whether that be rubs or scrapes, where does doe activity kind of fall in the ranking for you, right? Like maybe you hunt a spot and you see a whole bunch of doe, but it doesn't seem like any of them's like maybe coming into heat, or maybe you don't really see a buck, but you always see that one doe group, milling through. Is that something you kind of stick around and hopefully one of them goes into heat when you're there? Or do you kind of just like, okay, I've hunted this, I've seen them maybe a sit or two, nothing's really chasing these does just yet, so should I stick around here and wait, or should I bounce around?
I don't think either is necessarily wrong, but when I think about like hunting does at this time of the year, it's like I'll go back to those spots where I never saw a buck, but I saw a lot of deer. Like those spots where community center is a good example. Like if there was 10 or 11 or 12 does in a spot that I was hunting that I didn't really see much buck sign, or just looked like a kind of a good bedding area, that those bucks are going to infiltrate that at some point. So if like right this period on the 9th, 10th, 11th, that's absolutely what I would consider doing. But I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Like in a lot of areas, you might see bucks and does, or little bucks and does. I would especially be excited to hunt a spot that had, good topography that funnels movement, good sign, and a spot where it's like, hey, those more mature bucks have kind of been suppressed this whole time during to like weather patterns and heat. And now is kind of when they're going to be showing their face for the first time, maybe in this area that I've been hunting. So I don't think one or the other is wrong. I would just be going to the spot that I have the most confidence in. Like, could I see it? You know what it is. It's kind of an intangible. Like you look at something, you're like, I could see it happening. Like you can feel it in your head
stuff. Yeah. Now I'm with you on that. And I think with that question, it kind of boils. Okay, how has the movement been? Like, because with us, we hunt with 5, 6 people that we camp with, and we're all hunting the same area, and it's like we can bounce intel off of each other. Like, okay, maybe Justin and Jordan seen some movement over here, but like chasing, and we're not really seeing much over here. So if they're chasing somewhere, then you probably need to, at least my opinion, you probably need to go and try to find somewhere where they're chasing, and then possibly in the next day or two come back where these doe are that of. But also if it's one of those things where it's like you're hunting with the group and not a lot of people are seeing a whole lot of movement, then it might be better just to stay where the deer are and where the doe are, because especially, right now or, a week ago where there wasn't like an abundance of chasing, it's like if that pre-rut is kind of ramping up, then maybe that big old buck is just kind of going to be cruising by, checking on that doe group and then getting out of town. And that might be your best option there too.
Yeah, it's one of the benefits of hunting with a group of people is you just have a broader sample size of what's going on. Like there was a time this last week when we were hunting where I hadn't seen a deer in 3 or 4 sits in a row, and Jordan and Justin are like, yeah, I'm seeing bucks chasing and, little bucks pushing does around. It's like, cool, okay, I'm just in the wrong area. And then I made an adjustment and I saw 6 deer in one sit on the last day. And so it's just it's that time of the year, man. It's feast or famine right now. And if you're in it, you're in it. If you're out of it, you're really not in it.
Right. Yeah. So once we know that the rut is underway and it's time to think about how to plan your hunt, but hunting the rut is a little bit different than hunting the other times of the season, right? So let's talk about how the rut changes deer behavior and what that means for your hunting tactics, okay? Let's just start off with stand locations, right? Like, are you targeting bedding areas, travel corridors, food sources? Like how are you doing that for your specific big woods hunting? And then I guess we could talk about the ag stuff.
I would say like where we hunt in the mountains, I disregard food pretty much at all. Now, if food is in a location where I'm already wanting to be, where like by a bedding area or a good travel corridor, that's just one more checkbox right out of that situation.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to have it. But I disregard it this time of the year. This is when I'm like trying to really get close to bedding areas and like big long funnels, right? Like for instance, the spot you and I were hunting the other day. Well, the reason I like that spot is because there's bedding on
Caramel Horn.
The Caramel spot. Call it the Caramel spot because I watched a mid 130s 8-point with Caramel Horns run away from me when he went.
That's usually a common theme, right? And you see one, it's usually bounding off, and you're like, awesome.
Yeah, they are here. Yeah. No, that spot is like, I like hunting these spots like I call Ys. They're like, I call them a Y because that's what they look like.
Are you sure you're not just throwing up a peace sign from all the bucks? Like, see
I'm trying to do that, but I need a third finger that comes down right here.
Oh, gotcha.
Here. There you go.
Okay.
It's like multiple long funnels that come together that have bedding on each little side. right? And it's just, I like those areas because you can get, especially within like areas that have whiskey winds, like where we're hunting in the mountains. It's like your wind direction. No, I will pause briefly to tell a story. I threw a piece of milkweed the other day while I was in the stand, a spot that I called the Y, and it went in front of me. It went around my tree. It came back and it landed on my chest on the other side. I was like, awesome. So
Nice.
so I'm getting, I'm going to get screwed if one comes through.
I'm literally winding myself at this point, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm just looking for those, in the mountains, I'm looking for just really good long funnels mixed in with bedding areas on multiple sides. That's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for right now. What about you?
I mean, I think that's good. I mean, whatever you classify as a travel corridor, like, or a funnel, or however you want to put it, that could be multiple different things, but that's what definitely right now what you probably need to be focusing on is that. And if, kind of like where we hunt, there's probably old clear cuts that we classify as security cover, and which is bedding, but we try to basically get in between those two things. So you have like usually an old dried up creek, and then, which has some timber around it, right? Like whether that be pines or, a few oaks or whatever. And then you have fingers coming off of this little creek. And some people might call those like secondary funnels or whatever, but we just call them fingers, right? They're just fingers. So, and usually when those fingers hit, you have that tall grass, whether that be native grass or old select cuts or old clear cuts, however you all want to classify them, but that's what we consider bedding. And then we usually just hunt on one of those fingers, or maybe at the base of the fingers that connects to that old dried up creek bed. And, so therefore you have 2 or 3 different ways that they can travel down this corridor. And then you also have, where they have the bedding, which it seems like where we hunt, that's where they like to run around at, is in that tall grass. And then every now and then they'll just locate or go to cross that little dried up creek bed.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And other spots that we hunt, like when we hunt in the western part of the state where there's not really nearly as many trees and stuff, is like, I'm just trying to get as close and as tight to bedding as I can. And like in a lot of areas, that's like getting in it or on the edge of it. And just finding like a terrain feature, like on the lease that you're on right now, there's a singular piece. It's like a wet weather creek, just a dry creek that runs through the entire property. And those bucks just cruise up and down it. Just check with
I've never laid eyes on that, but on that.
Well, you'll see. But I would just be getting, like, if right now you're hunting on a winter wheat field that's not connected to bedding, and you don't have a gun, I'd be considering getting somewhere else. That's what.
So what if there's people like up in Kansas or maybe Nebraska or something like that, where they don't have these deep, terrain features or that topography that we're talking about? I mean, for me, I would just say hunt on edges, possibly. Whether that be the edge of where the timber meets the ag, or the timber meets, maybe a creek, because there's a lot of creeks in Kansas, obviously. But what's your take on that?
There's still things that funnel movement. Like there's creeks in those bedding areas. There's strips of timber that connect bedding areas. There's even within food, like a lot of times there's pinches. So there's like, if you had block timber and ag on top, and like, let's just say there was a small narrower where it kind of used and it gets narrow, that connects 2 pieces of timber together. You got to find places that condense, that get small. Like, cause if you're hunting with a bow, it's great if you're sitting in a piece of block timber that's 400 yards wide, unless you're hunting over a trail that leads out into the ag or something. How do you know that they're going to walk right there? So I'm just looking for places that pinch it, and even in places like Kansas and Nebraska, there is, like, even though it doesn't look like it on the map, there is topography that goes up and down. There's funnels, that are more subtle, but that's the kind of stuff I'd be looking for.
Right. Okay. Okay. So let's switch over to, which I have mixed feelings about sometimes, but there's a few times that it's actually worked out and it's been great. But calling techniques during the rut, right? So you got your grunt calls, your rattling horns, your doe bleats. Maybe people use this ain't really like a calling techniques, but like attractants and stuff. So let's just start with like using like grunt calls and rattling. What's your take on that during the rut?
I like it where deer aren't pressured. I love to. I don't really blind grunt ever, just because I feel like a grunt is a contact thing. Like, I like to see a buck and kind of gauge his reaction based on what I like to call. Like, I've grunted at bucks on public to try to get them to come closer, and it usually the only reaction it draws is like a like a
Like a
stop
local
and like
market.
a
I'm good.
what was that? I think a lot of that has to do with just people kind of resort to that tactic a lot earlier than they should in the season on public, and it kind of just educates those deer. I'll rattle every once in a while. I rattled in a buck this last week on public. On private, I would absolutely I'd blind rattle, would only grunt when I see a buck that's not going to come in. But to each their own. That's just how I use it. I like to, with a bow, especially on pressured public land, I like to kind of take the approach of like, I don't like giving my situation away where exactly I am, because that rattling the other day, that buck came out of the drainage at me and he pegged me before I ever had a chance. And when you're hunting in those pines and there's no foliage behind you, there's no foliage in front of you, like he was like, dude, that's tree cancer. I could see you.
Bow hunting is a game of confidence, and the last thing that you want to be thinking about when you're at full draw on a giant buck this fall is, I hope this broadhead does its job. I prefer a reliable, fixed blade broadhead that's tough, flies great, and penetrates deeply no matter the arrow setup. And that's why us guys at the Hunter's Advantage shoot Vantage Point archery broadheads. And just a few weeks ago in September, I laid down my first bull elk with the VPA Omegas. In my mind, there's no reason to risk messing with a broadhead that can have a mechanical failure when you can get a super tough, reliable broadhead that's sharp and flies great, and you don't have to worry about the thing failing on you. And if you needed any other reason to choose VPA, they're 100% made in America. To check them out, go to vparchery.com and make sure to use code HA10 at checkout for 10% off your next pack of broadheads. Once again, that's vparchery.com and make sure you use code HA10 at checkout for 10% off. Now let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah.
And because their ears are so good. I know
As a hunter,
it was right there.
all you got to do in that situation is just think skinny, and then you're fine.
Turn sideways, I disappear.
Yeah,
Maybe 10 years ago. But yeah, like I just don't like giving my location away or educating the deer on public unless it's like a very specific scenario where I'm like, I'm not going to be able to shoot that deer anyways. I need to try a Hail Mary.
yeah, there's
That's
definitely
about it.
situations for sure. Yeah, but to each their own, right? Like if you feel like, if your gut's telling you, yeah, I probably need to blind grunt or whatever, then do it, right? But don't get caught into that I don't want to call it, let's just say, don't get caught into that like myth that you have to paint a picture in a deer's mind, right? Because there's people that will, and I've heard them on public land. Actually, last year I heard one. He was hunting probably a finger 200 yards away from me. And the only reason I know it was a guy is because just the way he was playing the grunt flute and the rattling drums. He was doing that probably every 30 minutes. And after the first sequence, which was like 3 minutes long on each, I was like, dear God, dude, like, please. I seen deer. I seen like, yeah,
They were
I seen
running
a
away
good
from
buck.
them.
That's honestly why I think I was seeing that good a movement, because they were like, I ain't going over there, which I stayed quiet during that situation because honestly, I feel like if I would have rattled or grunted back at him just to play with him, he probably would have walked over there. Maybe. I don't know.
Dude.
But you can be too excessive with that. Rattling, I think, let's talk about rattling for a second. Okay.
Yeah.
I've never really heard bucks throw down before. You have, right?
Yeah.
So when people talk about, just tickling the antlers or something like that, that's obviously, I don't think, like deer fighting. If they're trying to represent deer fighting, that's not what it is. That might be like a little friendly, young buck sparring session or something like that, which I don't really think happens too often during the rut.
Yeah.
But what's your experience with bucks fighting? And then how would you kind of correlate that with your rattling sequence?
Well, a lot of I'm kind of like you. Like until I started hunting Western Oklahoma with our buddy Jake Ayers, like I never really had an opportunity to hunt like unpressured deer. And when you're hunting pressured deer, I feel like the sign goes down. They don't lay as much sign. The vocalization goes down, and they don't fight as much, right? And so when I went over to Western Oklahoma and got to see some mature deer actually start to throw down, I realized how uninformed my calling and rattling was. And the first time I saw a buck fight, I remember like watching it and sitting next to Jake, and this is probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I was like, these deer are going to kill each other. Like it is so much more violent than you think. So when people are like, grab those bags, I'm like, I'm like, that's not what that sounds like. I could take I bought a black rack the other day, and you can't hit them together hard enough to simulate how hard, because you have two animals that in Western Oklahoma, they're 200 pounds throwing their entire body weight out. I mean, it is boom. It is cracking them together. The first time I was with Jake and he rattled, I was like, dude, you're hurting my ears. Like, I need to plug my ears being this close to it. And he was like, that's what it sounds like. Really? And I watched two of them throw down in a wheat field, and it's just boom, and then they'll step to each other, and they'll come back again, boom, full speed ahead, hitting together, and it's like dirt flying, flipping. You'll see them flip over sometimes, and they're hitting each other while they're on the ground. Like, it is so much more violent than the average person thinks that it is. And I think you have to think about realism. How many grunts have you heard in Northeast Oklahoma in your life?
Northeast? Yeah. I've heard more like Spike's grunt than I have mature bucks.
Okay. It's not as loud as you think, is it?
No.
When you hear a guy, and I've got to hear this on public land, thank God, because it's been a good education. And I've probably been this person at some point.
I was about to say, so like a couple days ago when we were down there hunting public, I had 4 bucks chasing a doe, and they were zombified, and every single one of them were just, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now that was loud, but any other time that I've heard them, no. Like, pretty soft.
Well, I've got to see him do it, and it's it's not nearly as loud, and like you realize how far that sound actually travels. So like when somebody is, and they're doing that, and you're just like, dude, that's not realistic at all.
When a deer get caught in a coil spring trap and is like, running for its life, like, what's up?
Fighting for its freaking life. So now, if you know how to call and here, by the way, do whatever you want and mess it up. There's no reason not to try. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying once you see them do it in a realistic way, you realize how different it is from what you actually you hear people try to do versus what the wild actually sounds like. Rattling is a lot more violent, and grunting in my mind is usually a lot more soft unless it's in a full scale sense. Like, and Carol told me that too when he went and hunted the lease. I think it was 3 years ago. He texted me and was like, I hear bucks fighting. Dude, they're about to kill each other. I'm like, how far away is it? And he said, probably 150 yards away. And I was like, okay, so you're 150 yards away, and it sounds like two deer are going to die over this altercation. Most people don't rattle that way. It's like, I'm like, and it is, and it's hard because when you're on public, you're like, dude, if I hit these antlers together, if there's a deer within 300 yards, I'm either going to scare him or he's going to run in. So I would just say, if you're going to do it, I would go for it. I wouldn't commit. I wouldn't. Yeah. And that's why I think it's so situation specific. Like, if I was in a place with unpressured deer and it's November 9th, absolutely. Like, I would smash those things together, but make sure there's not a deer sitting in the grass watching you while you're doing it.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of sum up the grunt calls and rattling, definitely try it. Blind grunting, we're kind of against. Blind rattling, more for it, but make sure the rattling kind of sounds realistic. Watch some fights on YouTube, and just kind of feel it out from there, right? So just real quickly, since we don't really have much on this, what about like scent attracted for bucks? Doe estrus or maybe the drag rag or something like that. What's your thoughts on that?
I've seen it work. Like I said, private versus public or pressure. Let's just call it all pressure dependent. I feel like you see a lot of scent on public land, like a lot of tinks hanging from trees, a lot of doe and estrus cans that are just like cans of spray, spray cans that are just like somebody used and threw it on the side of the road because they're like, that's out. I don't ever really do that anymore, but I did when growing up. My dad did it a lot, like dipping a whole sock in doe pee and then tying the sock around the top of your boot and walking in. And I've seen it work several times.
Richie uses that quite a bit. Yeah,
I've seen it work. It absolutely can. It's just not a tactic that I really think I carry in my tool belt. I don't hold a lot of weight to it. Maybe because I haven't had to. So I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it can work, and I mean, I don't think it would hurt. Because if you walk in and the deer's probably going to smell, cut your track and be like, whoa, like it could be a pretty good little cover scent, right? Like I don't think it could hurt, because if the deer's going to cut your track, it might as well smell a little bit of doe pee or something along those lines rather than just your scent. And it could help, because there's been instances where Richie, which he's a buddy of ours and he hunts kind of down there in the same area. He's a killer in the big woods. And he's told stories about how he used a drag rag, kind of like, you just dip clothing in or a sock or a
bandana,
something in in that doe peat, and then you just tie a rope to it and you just drag it behind you. He said they're like a coon dog, literally coming all the way up to your tree. And so that could very well, work. And I just think that if you want to spend money on it, great, but I don't think it's like a make or break thing. I think it could help, and it probably wouldn't hurt to try. But just real quick, something we forgot was the doe bleat. What's your experience with the doe bleat? You think it's kind of the same as the grunt? Like could help, could not?
I've had better luck with a doe in a can than I had like a bleat, like that fawn that Anybody that's listening on
that's pretty good. You don't even need a doe in a can. Damn.
Anybody that's listening on their way to work, they know how accurate that is. So like that was the ones you got to hold your pointer finger on, and it. I've actually called in bucks doing that. My dad loves that thing. He plays that thing like first chair. In high school, but I don't really do the bleats. Like for my extinguisher call has one, and I haven't heard it enough in the wild to have any confidence in it. But the doe in the can, I absolutely have, and more specifically, like in late November, I've used it. But it could. It's just another tool. It absolutely can work.
The only doe call I've really heard out in the woods is usually her playing, that bass drum where they stomp it with their foot. That's usually what my doe play, and then they usually, do backup vocals. They're like, huh? So like that's usually all I hear. Exactly. But all right. So I guess we both kind of had experience with decoys. Yours probably a better reaction than the buck I shot off of a decoy. Yeah. But what's your feelings on using decoys during the rut?
Dude, the rut is just a time of feast and famine. It's just, it's either going to go better than you could ever imagine, or it's going to go as terrible, and to me, there hasn't been any in between. Like a decoy, a buck either really reacts well to it, or they head the other direction. And I think a lot of that has to do with just different temperaments of bucks, and I shot a deer over a decoy last year and came in ears pinned back, made a scrape 40 yards away on the edge of a field, and I never grunted, never rattled, never anything. And he saw that Elliott buck, and he was like, cool, I've got an ass whooping on aisle 4. I'm about to give it to you. And he was going to, and he ran, and I shot him before he did. But last year I watched a video of our buddy Micah, literally a 4-year-old buck, just blowing his decoy into like 6 pieces and hitting it that hard. So to me, it's just like all these things, calls, rattling, decoys, they're all, to me, kind of have the same effect. It's feast or famine. It's going to work really well, or it's going to hurt you. So that's why I think it's so selective on when and how you use it. It's so situational.
Something you kind of got to watch out for as well. It's like if a doe group usually comes in before you expect your bucks to come out, and I know it's the rut, anything could happen, but sometimes those doe get pretty curious if they just see a buck standing out there and they're like, what? And they'll literally go check it out. And if you're not careful, granted, we always spray the decoys down, or at least try to, with a limit shield and stuff, just to get our prints off of it. Those doe will literally come up, or maybe trying to go downwind of it and wind it a bit, because they're like, you look real, but you also don't. And so they're just like, you're not really sure about it. Yeah.
She doesn't even go there.
That's something to be mindful of, and I don't think if they blow at that decoy, I don't think that's really going to hurt you that much, in my opinion.
I think blowing's a normal sound in the woods. I think we think our hunts are over a lot of times, and they're not. I got blown out 8 times before I shot that 160 the other day. Yeah. That's just part of it, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So, real quick, moving on to the best times to hunt the rut, whether that be morning, midday, evening. You hear a lot of people saying that, especially where we're from, we like hunting. I like evenings better, but it's typically a lot cooler in the mornings because it's been cool all night. And then all of a sudden the sun starts coming up, and then it warms up, right? And then the evenings, your best and coolest time is like obviously right before dark. So mornings usually tend to be the most activity for us here lately. Yep. But what's your experience? And let's start with mornings, good or bad, or 1 out of 3.
Number 1.
Number 1? Yeah. Okay.
Number 1. And I would even put midday as number 2, and I put evenings as number 3 for me. Like,
what? Ain't no way.
Dude, that time, like after 10 a.m., let's just call it that, like 10 to, I'm not going to say 10 to 2, because if I'm hunting, it's usually like just extending my morning, like come on until 11 or 11:30.
Right.
I had a doe walk in on me a couple days ago, it was like 10:30 and I was tanking my camera arm off the tree and here she come. I was like, oh, here we go. And I was looking behind her, nothing. But
Shocker.
yeah, yeah, nothing. Shocker. I have a lot of confidence in that in the morning. That's how I feel about it. I'm a morning guy. I like the mornings. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's part of being a Southern hunter is, it's so freaking hot till like December that you're like, please, I don't want to sweat.
Yeah, here lately, it'll be low 60s in the morning and then like mid 80s in the evening. And so evenings do kind of suck. And like, I was making a joke the other day when we were down there. As soon as you came and grabbed me from my spot, I was like, dude, I'm pretty sure I picked the one tree that was the very last to get shade because the whole evening, like I was just getting baked, dude. Like I'm pretty sure my left side was sunburned and then my right side was just like white as snow. And I was like, nice, this is awesome. But yeah, so I would kind of disagree a little bit there. I would think more, as of right now, I would say mornings, evenings, then midday, just because I know you have to hunt midday to have success, but I just haven't really. And the latest I've hunted is probably like 12:30, and nothing's really came by me around that time. But we kind of want to talk about patience, persistence, and adaptability when hunting the rut. And kind of what we want to do is emphasize the importance of patience and persistence when hunting. And I know that's just kind of repetitive, but that's kind of my point here. And what I mean is like, it's okay to have a somewhat steady approach. Maybe don't get discouraged if things aren't happening right away, because it all has to do, to get that really full blown out, chasing or cruising or whatever, things have to work out in that favor, right? Like all the bucks are ready to breed, obviously, but they're just waiting on the does to whether, get a little bit in estrus, or especially if you find one in standing estrus, it's like, okay, game on, right? Yeah. But things have to take time to be able to evolve into what you want. And it might not be happening particularly the area that you're hunting. You might have to jump around and find that spot. But long story short, right now, I think, especially in the big woods, it just boils down to time in the stands. That has to do with patience and persistence, right? And with adaptability, it's like kind of what you were talking about earlier. Like this last week when we were down there hunting on public, we had multiple days of rain, high winds, and it was still warm. Those rains and high winds weren't even really bringing in, colder weather, which really sucks. And dude, that's like the worst combo ever, because last year that's the way it was too. We went down there when there was rains and high winds, but that happened to bring in the colder weather, which then started to, kind of light up the deer movement. But this year it wasn't kind of like that, and it really didn't get good until maybe our last 2 days there, probably. Yeah. And so that kind of has to do with the adaptability, right? Like if you're hunting the big woods and there's high winds and like, hey, I've already taken time off work, I'm here, so I'm going to hunt. Like even if I'm swaying in this tree, if you're the big woods, you kind of have an advantage of that, right? Because maybe on one ridge, you might be getting, blown out of your tree. But if you go down and tuck yourself into a bowl that still has a pretty good little travel corridor, that wind could almost be non-existent in some areas. So with that, you just kind of have to adapt to, the circumstances, whether, probably the wind in this example, where the wind isn't that big of an effect and you can probably see better movement because the deer aren't as timid. So with that, do you agree with all that, or do you have anything to add on the patience, persistence, and adaptability?
I think being adaptable is good. I think it's tough because like the situation that you were in the other day, where you see a behavior, the rut's kind of weird. Like you see a buck running on the top of a finger and through this grass. You're like, are they going to do that again, or was that an isolated incident? And so I would say like just being able to see things and understand patterns and just like risk it for the biscuit sometimes, right? You risked it the other day and it came out on top, like, or at least from an opportunity perspective. The opportunity was halfway there, I would say. So I hunted a spot a couple weeks ago and I seen a whole lot of does and I was like, cool. So I went back after hunting a few different spots this last week and I seen where I set up in a new tree that I seen a lot of the doe kind of come by, and I was like, okay, I'm going to sit right here. Well, as soon as you do that, you realize that, okay, further down, I seen a buck and a doe just kind of mill around, and I'm like, I need to be there. If a buck's there, I need to go over there. So that next morning, I sat over there,
and I didn't see that buck I didn't see that one particular buck, but what happened was a doe came blowing out from this tall grass and literally 2 yards under my stand, and behind her she was carrying 4 bucks, and they were all just zombified. And so that's kind of like, okay, if you see something, move. It's almost like that saying, if you see something, say something. Well, just if you see something, react to that and just move around, because it ain't going to hurt. What would really hurt is if you seen something, you stayed in the same spot, like, oh, I hope they come back here or come by me this time. Would probably hurt more is if you sat in a tree and then or that same tree after seeing that movement over here, and then you watch that same movement happen in that same exact spot 2 or 3 other times, and you're like, okay, then I'll move. It's like, no, you probably need to move right up front, even if it takes, all that work taking down your camera arm and rehanging your set, which sucks, trust me, I know. But sometimes that just, the adaptability part, you gotta kind of move and adapt to the surroundings.
We talked about adapting. Can you overhunt the rut rapid fire?
I don't think so.
Right, because I think it's constantly changing. A buck that's never ran through that corridor, this might be his first time chasing a hot doe in there. So I don't think you can overhunt the rut.
Early season or late season, definitely, but rut, no.
What can you tell me about things happening fast? Do you have any words of encouragement of, it only takes one opportunity?
Yeah, that's been our motto for, I guess, ever since we started HA, is like, it might suck. It's going to suck until it doesn't, right? And it only takes one to change that. You could be having a terrible season and all of a sudden a 160 walks out and you're like, this is the best season of my life. So therefore, it only takes one.
Trail cams. You rely on them all right now.
I'll let you answer this one first.
Yes and no. It's kind of a complex. If I have a big doe group in an area, I'm probably going to start to see some increased buck activity on my trail cams. That's cool. Doesn't mean it's going to happen again, right? But if I got an area with a lot of deer right now, that's probably a place I'd want to plant my butt for a little bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would kind of be on the opposite side of that, just because I feel like during the rut, if you go and check that camera, especially if it's just an SD camera, if it's already happened, it's probably already too late. That's where I'd say, because it takes 24, 48 hours for a doe to be out of estrus. And okay, so if that's the case, then you're already out of the game. So don't rely heavily on trail cameras. I think we covered weather conditions. So recap just real quick. That way people can have some just take home. This is probably going to be the most important the basics of the basics, right? So the rut, just time where deer get extremely honey. I guess I
knew that was the word you were going to say.
I know it.
Trying to find a PG word.
But how do you tell whether or not the rut is happening? That could be with increased movement, more buck sign being laid down like rubs and scrapes. You want to really check in on the doe behavior. And then the hunting tactics, real quick: stand locations, calling techniques, and decoys. Go, Christy.
I'm looking for funnels, small places that funnel movement. That can be bedding to bedding, bedding to food, just bedding areas, travel corridors, funnels, lots of those sort of things. Sign, you said?
Calling techniques.
Like I said, great time to blind rattle. I'm only grunting at a buck if I can already see him and gauge his behavior based on the grunts that I give him. Love that little doe in the can. If you want to try it, that's cool. No bleats, not something I'm going to use at this time.
Best times to hunt, probably all day, but
as much as you can.
Okay, as much as you can. There we go. Persistence, patience, and adaptability. It only takes one, baby.
I know that, but it's feast or famine right now. It is the time period where it is either on or it is off. I was having a pretty decent hunt. J-Cat was having one of the best hunts of his life half a mile away. It's feast or famine right now. And it only takes one. Don't get too discouraged, because it can happen at any moment. It could be 12:30. You've been holding your piss in all morning. You unzip that zipper. Here he comes, coming down the ridge. So
with that, guys, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Hunter's Advantage podcast. And now that you're armed with all this knowledge and strategies for hunting the rut, go out there, enjoy the hunt, and make some memories in the woods. So until next time,
creation.
God bless.
See you at the top.
Jesus loves you.
Bye.